How much do you really, truly know about the number side of healthcare staffing? You guys know I've said many times, if you're going to travel, you have to absolutely understand the number side so that you can make good decisions, so you can know what assignments make sense to you and truly what ones don't. Today, we're going to talk about advocating for yourself with a couple of really good guests on next week's edition of Travel Evolved. This is Travel Evolved. I'm Mark Holloway. So excited for today's episode. I'm excited, I'm nervous, I'll tell you guys that, because I've never done this before, and I've not done this before for a reason. So the topic is perfect, and it's one that we need to talk about, because we're going to talk about advocating for yourself as a traveler. You have to, and I think many people do. Many people should know when to advocate for themselves, when they should hold off. It's all about your marketability, what makes sense to you, and only you know that. So today, unprecedented on Travel Evolved, I'm actually going to have a couple of real NextGen MedStaff travelers on as guests today. So Maria Moreno and Nnamdi Ukanwa. So they've been with me since, both Nnamdi and Maria have been with me since, I guess, summer of 2022. So 10 months, 9 months, 3 assignments. Luckily, nonstop with us. It could have been. We'll talk about that. As they know, I always want them to chase dollars. It happens to be that we had one, and it made sense what we had more than anybody else, but that's the idea. So I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit hesitant. And that's the reason I've never done this, is because, and I hope you guys understand this, Travel Evolved is meant to be an educational series and a podcast and YouTube channel so that you guys become more valuable. Now, in my mind, I've always said, I think the more understanding and knowledgeable a traveler is, selfishly, very transparently, and purposefully, the more that traveler makes more sense for us, NextGen MedStaff, and for NextGen MedStaff to make more sense to that traveler. I didn't design a company that was designed for travelers that didn't understand, because they either wouldn't understand our value, or they wouldn't know what they had, or they wouldn't be able to do the recruiterless model, which I really do believe, and I'm in my heart of hearts, that there are many travelers out there that truly, in fact, do need a recruiter to guide them for a while. So when Maria and I were talking about this, it was hard, because I said, I don't know how to have you guys on and not talk about NextGen MedStaff. So I said, fine, we're just going to talk about NextGen MedStaff, because it doesn't matter. But I do want you guys to understand that the point of this is, and we'll talk about it after, we'll see how the interview goes, but the whole point of this is that I want to bring a lot of travelers into the fact that you guys do have this. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about what NextGen MedStaff is doing. I mean in general. So that's the fine line I'm trying to walk here. I believe that the industry is evolving, and it absolutely has to change and figure out a way for you guys to make more money. And it has to do so without gouging the hospitals a higher bill rate, or that won't work. So the only way I know to do it is, in fact, a model that allows for an agency to take less. Certainly agencies have a choice of taking how much or how little, but how do you grow an agency and become bigger and bigger without having to slowly creep that pie up? And it's a very difficult process, as any company that's been there. So I really want you guys to think about today, not our company, and I'll try not to talk about NextGen MedStaff very much, but just about the concept that a lot of new things are coming out that allow you to advocate for yourselves because you understand way more than you think about this industry. This industry should not be secretive. There should not be anything that you don't understand or that your agency isn't providing for you, including right down to the bill rate. And I've always said, why wouldn't a traveler, if you're doing things well and you can explain to a traveler where the money goes, that's an important caveat, then they should know the bill rate. If someone doesn't want to hear about taxes, about a potential small 5% vendor fee, and about a company margin, then I don't want to tell them the bill rate because it's going to look like, and it does to many people, like an agency or like they're only getting about half or slightly over half of what the bill rate is. A lot has to do with taxes. So obviously the higher the bill rate was during the pandemic, the more taxable income that becomes, which means it hurts the company. So there was that. So it probably shrunk down even further. But I've always said, if you can explain the pie and go back and listen to that episode, then you should be able to be forthright about exactly what you're being able to bill every hour. Why wouldn't you? If you aren't, that means you don't want your traveler to know. So when Maria and Nnamdi and I were talking about this episode, and we were talking actually when I was still in Florida, and I said, yes, let's have you on, and we've been trying to get him on for a while. We're gonna have him on today. It was kind of like, how do I do this without talking about what they've learned, not only here, which is fine, but how do I tell people and talk about an app and the technology that allows them, with their knowledge that they've gained, on just the School of Hard Knocks, other travelers, their experience, a little bit from what we've done here. How do we talk about that without talking about NextGen MedStaff? So two things happen. One of them is we're going to talk about NextGen MedStaff because it's not so much about the company, it's about the concept that I think travelers need to hear, that this is where it's heading. Secondly, I've decided, and I said to the team, I said, before we wrap up season one, let's throw a new one in there. Let's actually have an episode about NextGen MedStaff so we can get it out of the way and we can stop talking about it and we can have the idea out there and our concept, and then we can get back to the other 200 and some odd episodes we have planned. So, all right. So today I've got, and I can't do it down in the studio. I'm gonna have to go because I'm having some Wi-Fi issues. I tried to do it here. So when I'm done, I'm actually gonna pause the recording. I'm gonna go and we're gonna do the segment, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about what we taught and what we learned and what we had and what we discussed. These are two travelers again that have been with me for, like I say, since the middle of summer, I think, in 2022. They're on their third assignment. I think Nnamdi just started his. He's joining Maria. He took a little bit of a break, and he's joined her now. So they're going to try to end at the same time. But this is all about some things that they've gone through and how they used their industry knowledge, the supply and demand curve, to fight for higher pay rates and bill rates, which means bill rates for us. Doesn't mean that we're giving them more. We just had to get more money from the facility because they know they were transparent. So they had to fight for some bill rates, fight for some time off, understand that there are things that can happen during the course of an interview that may or may not, come to fruition when you take an assignment. So we go back to some of those early episodes where, getting through a tough assignment or deciding you don't want to. But advocacy in today's example is really about you as a traveler advocating for what you need, and that is to be paid fairly and to be able to evaluate an assignment and understand if this is a good fit or a bad fit, and to know when to walk away from something, know when to end something, and know when to run towards something that makes sense to you. So I'm going to have them both on today. I'm excited about it. I'm nervous, I will tell you, because like I say, this is an important episode, and it's going to be hard for me to not incorporate everything, but I just think it's important you guys hear this. So without further ado, I'm going to end this, and we're going to go, and I'm going to go someplace. I'm actually going to be, I think, at my house because, as I told you guys, I'm heading to California. So that's what we're going to do today, and we're going to do that episode. So without further ado, I guess, here is the interview I did and I'm going to do in a few seconds with Maria and Nnamdi. There they are. Hey guys, how are you?
Hi.
We've talked a lot. We've never actually talked like this on a Zoom or a FaceTime or anything else before because we just haven't. So it's always fun to, kind of see people and that sort of thing. So I guess I'll jump right in. I kind of want to talk to our audience. I know we're going to talk about a lot of things about advocating for yourself. And I think it's such a great topic to go over today, especially, not necessarily nursing advocacy or if you're an allied professional, but really about traveler advocacy, which I think we'll talk about. So I want to give our folks a little bit of a brief history, and I think I kind of want to just remember kind of both of your history as nurses and as your experience as a travel nurse, because you guys have been with us since the summer of 22, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess briefly tell us kind of, again, just kind of nursing and travel history and what your experience was up until that point.
Yeah, definitely.
So we started right like mid-pandemic, I think. We took a couple contracts. Our first contract was in Florida. Then we went to Nevada. We did a contract there. We went up north to Massachusetts. And after traveling for about a year within those three places, we decided to stay back home. And that's where we found our new agency.
So again, I call you guys kind of the new traveler, and I think it's really interesting to me because I really do think there's quite a difference between new travelers and old travelers, and there's good and bad, in my opinion. So you guys kind of fall into that new category, which means it's tough. You guys kind of started traveling when the money was insanely high, I would imagine. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's definitely correct because I've been in nursing 4 years, and during the pandemic, I was still a staff nurse, and we got a lot of travelers into the hospital, and some of them were just going crazy with how much they were making, and we were thrown right into the middle of it. So yeah.
I say that a lot, I guess I was kind of guessing. I mentioned this, I think, in many episodes. I said that it was hard for staff RNs to hear this insane money and not finally go, okay, this is nuts. I got to go make it. If you're able to, and it sounds like both of you guys were. Is that the same experience you had, Maria?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really hard because, again, the money was ridiculous, and I said that there's a point where you can't ignore it, and you have to say, I'm crazy for not at least doing the same thing too.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what it was. So again, kind of a side note, how have you guys found, my biggest concern with new travel nurses, I should say, that haven't been traveling, kind of your exact scenario. Are you disappointed that wasn't forever? Did you know that was going to be the case? And are rates now still making sense to you as a travel healthcare professional?
When we got right to it, it was towards the end of the big box. We saw a lot of nurses making the good money before we came into travel. And when we started, we knew it wasn't going to be forever, but we didn't know how long COVID was going to last. Because, when we got in, the pandemic was still hitting really bad. And, people were still in the ICU, people were still gowning up. They still had like the mask mandates. So we didn't know how long it was going to last. And they had just gotten the vaccine and people were iffy about getting it at that time. So we were hoping it would last for a little while to our benefit,
Right. It's weird to say, isn't it? But I agree. I know. I get it.
But yeah, we kind of are disappointed with how, everything changed and how the corporations took advantage of cutting down the pay and trying to push everyone back into staff nursing. But we were not expecting it to end that quickly.
And with that, I feel like it's also really safe to say we knew it wasn't going to last. So we worked our tail off and we went wherever we needed to go. We, traveled. We had a lot of fun. We worked super hard that whole time. But I think we didn't expect it to go down. Just from 1 week to another. I remember we were in
right?
Yeah, I mean, it was we were mid-contract, and they were in a week your rates are going. I think it was maybe cut in half, and then they were switching our positions. So I think we were working a COVID unit that contract, and then they were you're going to become float pool. And
yeah, I said I was really lucky that I don't think I had anybody that we had to cut mid-contract for whatever reason it was. And we weren't doing anything unique. It wasn't anything we had done. It just happened to be lucky that our vendors allowed us to complete contracts. But certainly we had issues with big cuts and extensions. So we had a lot of people say it wasn't worth it. And then we had a lot of folks that were booked, I guess, and in the process of credentialing, and they actually would call us and canceled before they started, which was tough too. And all we were praying for is that people hadn't started to put money out for housing and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
because that just makes us. It's just there's so much liability. It really was hard that time, but we were lucky we didn't have anything mid-contract. But I did hear a lot about, hey, if you want to stay, here's your new rate, or you're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The drop was like it was a steep slope.
Yeah.
It just went down.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like for you guys, at least, obviously you're still working. You're working with us now, and it sounds like even though the rates have obviously diminished substantially, you guys are also in a state where, there's no state tax. The cost of living is reasonable, so the rates tend to be, lower nationally because there's a reason. It's an easier place to recruit for because it's nice there. There's a lot of different
Yeah.
parts to the state of Texas, so
Yeah.
that's. It's kind of one of those things that, you get what you pay for. So you guys know that that's a relatively lower from a national average pay rate in general, which is great. Just like Florida and Arizona, some of those other places, which is good. But it still sounds like it's at least at this point still making sense to the two of you for the lifestyle you guys are looking for, at least currently.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot that it hadn't been. You never know if you've got somebody who's married and they've got kids or who knows what it is, and it made sense making 5,000, but it truly actually doesn't. Believe it or not, make sense if they were making 4,000. There's a lot of those folks that kind of left, which we've been talking about, trying to explain what's happening now.
It was easy for us because we live together, we work together. Our expenses were cut in half, so we were making double, triple what staff nurses were making, but our expense part was half. So
Yeah.
It made sense for us all around.
Yeah, you know what? And it's funny because we have an episode coming up about traveling with a partner. We just did it, and I didn't mention how you can. That's a great benefit. So, duh on me. So there you have it. But
Yeah.
all right, so you guys have been traveling now. So let's kind of talk about. I know the history of this thing. We had, and tell me if I'm right because it's been a little while, and you guys had used our app. You downloaded our app, and you were working on it. I think you found a couple things that we'd submitted both of you in front of, and you found something that made more sense, and it was because it was, if I'm not mistaken, very close to home. It was a travel assignment, but they were okay with you being relatively local, and it financially, without the expense of housing, the numbers, the amount you would take home made more sense than a higher paying position that was further away where you'd have to do housing. Is that am I right on that?
Right.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. So we were mad and we stomped our feet, and you had all kinds of recruiters, that were selling you we're not going to work with. No, I'm kidding. So we said, fine. Again, what I've always told you guys, and I can't remember if I think I was talking to both of you. I said, our objective is to have you find the assignment that's best for you. And like I've always said, and I'm not trying to promote the thing, but I am going to a little bit.
I'll promote it for you.
Oh, thanks. I knew that, again, the idea was that there was nobody trying to talk you into what you guys knew was best for you. And that's one of the things I like about the way our company works, because only and you don't have a recruiter trying to say, oh, well, here's the thing. So we said, no problem. Take that one. We'll see you, next time or whenever it's ready. And if you don't extend, and then you called because this is where we really want to talk about the episode. You kind of had not a bait and switch, but the job wasn't as advertised, let's say. Tell me, and all of our listeners kind of what really happened there. Without naming any hospital stuff. We're going to try to stay away from hospital names. I don't want to get anybody.
Oh yeah, definitely. Not throwing anyone under the bus.
Thank you. Good. Because I don't want any lawyers calling me.
But we had just decided to take a contract in Texas, and what we do is we apply broadly, different agencies, multiple, to the point where sometimes we don't even know who we're talking to. And we're like, can you remind me what position we applied to again? And we got a contract close to home, and I think at the same time we're also using your app. And what we do is we just go in there and we just submit to so many hospitals without even thinking about the location or anything.
As long as the numbers made sense, right? You
Yes.
applied to anything that was financially here and above, as long as it wasn't completely on the other side of that huge state.
Right.
Yeah. So we got to the contract. They set everything up. We got there. We started orientation, and I think they had an issue at first. They had an issue. It was like a pushback or something. But eventually, we got there. We started orientation, and we found out the position they advertised was for a med surg floor. And when we got there, they said, you guys are not just med surg, you're going to be med surg float pool, and you're going to float throughout the whole hospital, and you'll be getting the same pay rate and everything. So we said, no, this is not what we signed up for. We talked to the recruiter, we called her, and just like every recruiter out there, they try to talk you into staying. And yeah, and we were like, no, this is not what we signed up for. We've seen this before with other people where they like go to a contract because they're far away from home, and they change the terms and conditions of the contract when they're there, and they can't go back home because they've invested money. Just like we met a guy from Florida who had stayed 2 weeks. They pushed his date back 2 weeks at that contract, and he was stuck. He had to stay. But since we were close to home, we said no. This is not what we signed up for, and we had to go back.
Was this one of those auto offers, or did you actually speak with somebody that to kind of interview, or was it back when everybody was just saying they look great? Come on, come to our hospital and work.
I believe it was an auto offer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe it was an auto offer, but the way they made it sound, they said we are here to advocate for you. We have a liaison at the hospital, and if anything goes wrong, if there's a problem, just talk to the liaison. If you have to stop middle of a shift, just call the liaison and let them know, and we're going to take care of you. And they sold us a dream, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got there. It wasn't like that. And if I remember, you guys said it was mostly like float pool. It wasn't even med surg, an occasional float pool. It was
Right.
float pool. Like the position really had changed to something completely different. And you guys were instantly uncomfortable. Was it? And it was because it was outside of your scope of work, or was it because it was just the amount of places you were going to go that made you uncomfortable? Or in other words, it wasn't that you were going to float. It was that it was all float, and that's really not your scope of work, which I'm guessing would make you feel like you'd be in an area where your license could be in jeopardy because you didn't really know what you were doing, for lack of a better word, and put it in layman's terms.
I think, yeah, for sure that's part of it. And then the other part is just if you work 3 shifts or 4 shifts in a row, you know what you're coming back to. You know your patients, you know their conditions, you know what to expect. When you're float pool, every day is new. Every day is new patients. Also, we work together because if one of my patients is crashing, I know that he knows my patients and he's taking care of them. So that's why we work together. We do have that support on the floor. As travelers, sometimes we don't always have a lot of staff support. So we do count on each other, and we lean on each other in those harder shifts. And so that's with float pool, we don't get floated to the same unit every time. So it's not what we sign up for. We tend to not do
So
those
good for you guys. You knew it was a bad fit. And again, obviously, as we've talked about ad nauseum here on Travel Evolved, of course the recruiter tried to talk you into staying because they want to make money. It's a commission. They're seeing deals walk out, and that's a bummer for them. But I think you had said, Maria, the other day when we were talking about beforehand that this gal, for example, I think it was a girl, she wasn't mad. I mean, she was maybe disappointed, but she did her best to try to keep the deal on her table. But you actually said she wasn't, like trying to mislead you or whatever. At the end, this particular company and this particular recruiter kind of said, okay, I get it. You guys, this really is a bad fit. And she probably saw the writing on the wall that was never going to last 13 weeks and probably tried to save the relationship, which hopefully sounds like she did. Is that kind of accurate, or was there any kind of pushback, or there wasn't any penalty or any kind of fine that the agency tried to send you or anything like that? Was there?
There wasn't any penalty or fine, but again, we had a contract saying we were going to a specific unit. So there was really no legal way for them to be like, oh, you finished a contract, because it's like, well, I can finish my contract as long as I'm on the unit that I signed a contract for. But that wasn't the case. She wasn't upset. I think she originally did try to advocate, and then she maybe realized how much money had already gone into maybe credentialing and her time and this, and she got a little more aggressive and was like, oh, so do y'all just not expect to float? And so at that point, you really have to sit down and be like, no, I've worked this, every day that I go to work. I don't not expect to float. We don't not expect to float, but floating within a unit and floating every day is very different. You can float once a week, once every 2 weeks, but not every shift. And so that just wasn't for us.
Gotcha. All right, so let's fast forward. So that's good. So again, I think the point is that you stood your ground and said, hey, we know what we're willing to do. We know what makes sense. And I think that's, I mean, obviously we know how important that is. If there's an area where it's just not as advertised, and I would tell anybody that's listening to us that if you're interviewing and a manager, and we've seen this before, where a manager isn't forthright about everything, or the amount of floating, or the amount of call that you're going to go on a call back, that's, I think, kind of a little bit of an issue in the industry where you're trusting that person to kind of tell you everything. And I've always told our listeners, make sure you ask the question. If the question's out there and you specifically say, how much are we going to be on call, or how much are we going to float, it oftentimes is really hard for that manager to kind of go back and change that, because he or she knows you guys had that conversation, and it makes it more difficult. And I always would advise our listeners to, those things that are important to you, make sure you ask them, because it does kind of change the dynamic when all of a sudden it's happening.
Yeah.
So, all right. So then what happened, obviously, is you jumped on with us. There was obviously a lot of opportunity. You came on with NextGen MedStaff. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it may have been an auto offer. You guys had an assignment. I'm going to make sure I take my notes, because I want to get specific to what kind of happened, where we started really kind of seeing some advocacy on both of your parts, and how it really works and how it really made sense. And I think the biggest one was you guys looked to extend, right? Now, we had just talked earlier how you had finished 13 weeks and there was an extension offer. They wanted you, they needed you. And again, I'm going by memory. Tell me if I'm accurate.
That's correct.
The rates were dropping consistently across the country. And I think we had a healthy conversation and an honest conversation that we kind of anticipated it would, because I think it was a pretty solid rate beginning. Made good sense. I think it was one of the higher paying ones around the area.
Yes.
And no, it was a solid rate. It was
right.
It was probably the highest one in Texas by far.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Because we pay more than anybody. It should have. That means what that tells me is the bill rate was the highest anywhere, and of course, we should be the top paying for that bill rate. So it was a combination of their bill rate was high and us taking less, which is how it works. But the extension came through, and of course, I think I communicated with both of you, hey, there is a drop, and here's what it is. And Maria, you immediately said, well, everybody else that's been extending up until literally last week or even early this week, they kept their rate the same. I'm going by memory, but I remember we had a conversation where you told me, this is what I'm seeing in the unit. And am I accurate to start with that?
Yes, that's what happened. Because Maria is very friendly. She talks to everyone, and she talked to, I think, almost all the travelers on the floor, and she got a sense of how much everyone was making, and the people that renewed, how much they were getting for renewing. And when it came to our position, they tried to drop the rate. And since we've been traveling, even as staff nurses, it's been like, just advocate for yourself. And immediately she had the conversation with me on the way home from work, and she said, I just talked to this person and they're making this amount, and this is how much we're getting offered. And she said, we cannot take it. If there's another place that is offering more, we're going to go there. But for the work that we do and the thing that we bring to the floor, because we know the kind of nurses we are, she was like, no, we're not taking that. So she spoke up immediately. And I think when we got to the hotel room, before we even did anything, she got on the phone with you.
Yeah. This was a really good conversation. It was very unique for me too, because it told me a lot about the two of you guys. And we'll talk about Travel Evolved. And I know you both have told me you guys had been listening to us before. I guess we should have said that. You guys found us through this podcast and YouTube. Is that right?
Facebook.
Facebook, yeah.
I found
Facebook. Okay. Gotcha.
Mhm.
But you had listened to Travel Evolve before you, so because you knew, isn't that right? If I remember last summer, you said you listened to some episodes. Am I?
Yeah, so I someone reached out to me on Facebook because as a traveler, that's sometimes where you get your jobs from. And someone reached out and they were like, "Hey, check out this agency. This is like our CEO." And I was like, "Well, this is weird," but I called and I was like, "Hey, do you have an agency?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then the
That's
next
right.
day, I guess you mentioned it to the guy, and he was like, "See, like I wasn't lying." And then I just did a little more research on the agency, and I found this podcast, and I was like, "All right,
Right.
I'm gonna listen to this podcast." And I started listening to it, and it's just so educational that I kept listening, and then I was like, "Yeah, like this is the type of agency that I want to work for." And so we talked about it and ultimately made the decision to really go
Yeah,
in.
and I remember that now because it was we become friends, and I know I talked to you. You're kind of the spokesperson for the two of you oftentimes, which is great. But I know also we're also on speakerphone a lot, so I can talk to both of you. And so that conversation that Nnamdi was talking about, that was so interesting because I felt like we really worked as a team. You told me what you wanted, and we had an open and very honest discussion because I remember talking to you, said you knew that you felt very confident that people were being extended and they were being offered the same rate. You also told me that we talked about the level of needs at that unit. And so those two combined made you feel that, listen, they really need us. I think we were only talking $5 or $10. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't a huge drop, but
Yes.
at
Yes.
80% of that at the time, or I guess 81, we were at 19% margin. Now we're at 18. So 81% of that was really yours and Uncle Sam's, right? So it was coming out of
Yes.
mostly your pocket. But we had an honest discussion about that you said, I feel strong enough that I'm willing to, not work here if this doesn't work. And we did have an honest discussion that said, if it doesn't, then this could be over, no problem. And then you'll go from there, whether it's with us or something else, because we wanted to talk about what the possibilities were, because that's the way we work together. And it was so fascinating to me because I felt good about what we talked about because it was, it made sense. And we took that with a true understanding of what the options would be and both being okay with it. Mostly, again, I always say I work for you guys. I was comfortable that no matter what, and the way you asked me to handle it, we presented it, and did we get everything? Or did we get close? Did they negotiate? Did they offer what we wanted?
We got
We got it.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was like they met us in the middle or something. So we got everything that the extension stayed at the exact same
We
rate.
got it. We got it. She insisted. I think at some point I was like, you know what, we got the money that we wanted, but she said, they need us. They know what we bring to the table. And I think we needed some time off or something, and we needed to make a
Yeah,
switch.
we're gonna talk about that in a sec.
Yes. And
Yeah,
she
yeah.
did that
Sorry.
in as well.
Mhm.
So I think that what it was, I may have lost my train of thought, but when it was the fact that we said that you guys knew the scenario and you guys were telling me and advocating for yourself, saying, we understand this is what's happening. And really, it was a situation where I don't know if a recruiter or another company would have, but you were telling me what you wanted. And we also had a discussion about what would happen if we didn't get that, because it is unusual for, especially nowadays, and when prices were dropping or rates were dropping, bill rates were dropping, and you guys have always known, am I right, what the bill rates are? We've always had, I've told you, I've told people, I tell you, you guys know
Yes.
exactly where your bill rate is right
Yes.
now. You think um, that it had dropped, and you had said it didn't make sense, and so you advocated for yourself because the things that you knew, you felt comfortable, and turned out both of you guys were absolutely 100% correct, that you felt that this hospital needed you and it was worth it, and not to mention that everybody else was making the same, so it wouldn't have been fair for them to try to drop it at that point. Of course, the hospital is always going to try to get you at the cheapest that they can,
Yes.
but and I think we even said it still would have made sense. I mean, just behind the scenes, we said it makes sense if you had to go to the low rate, but let's it may not make sense enough that we may be able to find something different. So let's try to go for it. So we did. And yeah, like you said, they said, absolutely. So we signed another 13-week assignment. And that was all the two of you guys. It really was. The only difference, I think, is that we worked as a team where it's supposed to be, because like I've always said, I work for you guys. Sometimes, other other companies work for themselves, and you're more of a number. So we
Uh-huh.
got that, and everything was hunky dory. We thought we were good. And here's where it also we had yet another issue, right? Because the only thing that we kind of goofed on, and I think we both admitted this, was, kind of, it would have been easy to put in there. The manager had given you some verbal commitments for some important dates that you guys needed off during this extension.
Yes. Yes.
And
So we needed a couple days off 3 months ahead of time, and we started we started telling them, hey, we're going to need time off when we renew at this time. And they said yes, that's totally doable. It's something that we can do. And it wasn't just a one-time thing, it was a reminder. And Maria is good to like stay on top of things, where she reaches
yeah, I
out to
know.
you every week. And she just kept reminding them every time, hey, we're going to need time off for this. And
Yeah.
being 3 months ahead of time, they didn't have a schedule, but they made that commitment verbally that yes, we're going to give you this time off.
Right. And so what it was, and again, we didn't even know about it, right? Because you felt so comfortable with this person, this manager who you'd been working for, and it was just a weekend, if I'm not mistaken. And you guys had committed a whole bunch of weekends, and you were doing the heavy lifting on those weekends. But there was a weekend down the road that you said, "Hey, this is coming up." So the only thing we goofed on is that you felt comfortable. You didn't need to put that in the contract. We didn't need to tell them, because this manager had given their word. So we didn't know until we started talking. I went, uh-oh, and I was concerned, but I wasn't really concerned because of the level of trust that you had with the person that was, doing the schedule. And then lo and behold, out of the blue, tell us what happened. How did it all of a sudden they were saying no, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We so maybe it's important to say, maybe it's not, but that particular contract had a lot of moms and had a lot of people in the family. And since we traveled together, we were like, you know what, let's work all weekends. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 13 weeks. And then we renewed, and we were like, we can do this again. Because I think when we go there, we really do go with the intention of working and getting paid, but also like we do want to do what's best for our unit, and we do put, heart into it. So we decided to work weekends to help them out. It's two of us, so it's two bodies. Um, but this particular weekend, we had an event, and it was an event that we knew months in advance. We let them know months in advance. And it was from the get-go, it was just like very heavily pushed back. We brought it up to them like, hey, like we worked every weekend for y'all for months, 4 or 5 months. Like we need one weekend off, just work with us, like please, we want to stay here. We had obviously been comfortable. We knew staff. We knew how things worked. We understood the system, the charting system. We understood the floor, and so we were more comfortable. So we wanted to stay,
Yeah.
but it just didn't work out.
I'll say that's true. I'll tell our listeners that's true. You had some heart-to-heart conversation with me where I was just listening to you, and it was obvious to me that this wasn't you. You were sad more than mad. You were bummed out because you liked the unit. You were helping. You guys had it worked out where it made sense to you to be able to go and knock weekends out. And you said that there was a whole bunch of people that was really a problem for. I think that's what made it so tough, is that you guys had, like I said, done all the heavy lifting, and you had adhered and really come in as a traveler pair to help where they really needed it. And all you were asking was for a weekend with plenty of advance. And they kept saying, well, it's not in the contract. All of a sudden, not they kept, all of a sudden it was, well,
Yeah.
it's not in the contract. And I know there was some issues with the person that you talked to. Maybe he wasn't there anymore and someone else came in, or I don't remember what it was, but we again, you guys advocated for yourself, and this time you stuck with your guns and said, we're doing this because it's important to us, and we have given them plenty of notice. And they said, if you do, then we're going to end the contract. And good for you guys, you did, and they ended the contract, and that's what happened. And you knew your value, you knew your marketability as a traveler. You got something else. You started another assignment with us, which is great. And it made sense because you didn't just take it. I mean, it would have been easy and you probably could have canceled that weekend. I think you even said, but it was more at that point a matter of principle where someone had looked you in the eye and said, no problem, sign here and we'll do it. And it was, I think, because of how much of the stuff that no one wanted, the shifts no one wanted that you guys were doing, that was kind of made you more, you were saddened and disappointed more than you were mad, I think, if I had to tell you how you felt.
Yeah.
It came across very clearly. So again, this time we didn't get what we wanted. And I think I even said, tell me if I said this, I really didn't think I thought they were going to let you have it off. If I had to, my experience said they're going to let you have it off. They need you too bad. And I think they for whatever reason, and that hospital, we won't mention the name, they do have a high bill rate. And I've always said it's for a reason, because it's a pretty busy unit, right? And it's not in, it's not in a place where a bunch of young people like yourself really want to go to, right? It's not we're not talking about Austin, right? Or San Antonio or something like that. So we'll say that, and that's not saying anything. So it's a difficult market. I mean, that's why the bill rate's high. I mean, you guys chose a high paying assignment because it made sense financially, but it wasn't, again, Austin and San Antonio typically are lower because they're easy to staff for. So that, I think, was what was so tough. And you guys, you talked about it financially. You knew that if it ended, that you guys were going to be okay because you had stockpiled some money, but you also knew that it was going to be time to find something new. And again, that's what you did. So advocating for yourself, I think, was a big part of that. So let's kind of talk more about that. Just the whole advocacy itself. Maria, you and I have spoken a lot about hours 36 to 40, overtime, and you've listened to a lot of those. And I think you guys really understand, both of you do now, how that sort of thing should be paid. And I guess my question for you is how well armed do you feel now to talk about with any company and be able to advocate financially for pay rates and how to be paid and the things that are going to be important to you guys going down the road?
Before we started traveling as staff nurses, one of the things that I was very, very tough on was advocating for yourself, because I worked in a hospital where it was like a family. Everyone took care of each other. So being thrown out there into travel nursing was eye opening for us, But the good thing about it was I found out earlier as a new nurse that you had to advocate for yourself. If not, they're just going to use you. If you pick up shifts, if you pick up 6 shifts a week, they're going to use you for it. It doesn't matter if you're doing overtime, if you're burned out, they're just going to use you for it. And Maria's background as a person, she's tough. She wouldn't take anything from anyone. So with that combination, it was just, once we started traveling, we started seeing stories, especially on Facebook, about people that would go to a contract and get canceled on like week 1, and they already paid for housing and they lose thousands of dollars into it. So we were like straight on from the beginning. I remember the first contract we did. I think after the first week we were not paid, and we called in and said we're not coming to work the next day if we don't get paid. And it wasn't even on a payday, and they paid us by evening.
Yeah.
So we realized quickly that once you speak up for yourself, they're going to do something about it. But if you keep quiet, they're just going to like ride the coast and not, it's just whatever.
And I think it's also important to say, like, that was our first contract. We, as staff nurse, it's really hard to save. So we didn't go with a lot of savings. So we had already invested, time and a lot of money getting there. So we needed that money for that first week, just to like balance out.
Right.
And so to not get paid and still have to pay rent and still have to buy food and, the transportation there. It was something that we had to be like, no, like, this needs to be done.
Right. So that was an important aspect, and rates make sense. And again, what Nnamdi just said is, I mean, this may sound weird coming from me, but I've always said I'm realistic enough to realize that agencies we tend to treat travelers like a number. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's a business. It is meant to be that way. So why don't travelers treat us like a number? And I feel like that's where the shift is moving toward, is that, you know, mutually we can still, everything can be great, but as travelers, you should be saying, where do I want to go? And what company can I be paid the most money at? I mean, if it's the same bill rate, why would I go with a company that's going to pay me even $100 less a week?
Yeah.
It adds up. And I feel like that's kind of where it seems like the trend is shifting to, especially with newer travelers. And I think travelers have been around for a while that are now figuring it out. It's, you've been treated like a number forever, so it should be mutually the same way. And I think that when you guys start holding agencies more accountable for pay rates, I mean, that's really what separates us, right? I mean, there's little nuances, but at the end of the day, we all do the exact same thing. It really comes down to what you're being paid. And I think most travelers don't really do the math to extend whatever the differences are over the course of a year. And then, of course, when you start throwing things in like to be paid properly for hours 36 to 40, that adds up. And then your overtime should be based on time and a half of your full compensation, not just the taxable amount. It starts making a big difference. And I think, and I'm hearing more companies are paying like we do for 36 to 40. And I think more companies are doing overtime properly because it's extra hours. But I feel like you guys really do have a good handle on understanding what the industry is shifting toward and how to take good advantage of that if you guys are going to continue traveling.
Yeah, I think when we started traveling, we didn't know much about the bill rates until we started working with your company. And you basically broke down everything from like the taxing to, the third party, the middleman who takes, their own card and, with insurance and everything that you guys have to pay for. And I think that made it easy for us to like understand, okay, this is how this works. If they say the bill rate is, let's say, for example, $100 and you end up getting $50 an hour, it's not your recruiter taking,
Right.
$50 out of your money. There's a lot that goes into it. So I think you taking time out to like explain everything, how it actually works, it definitely opened up a lot of understanding for us to understand how, okay, this is how this works. And if they say this is the bill rate, then this is how much we can look at making. And just being open, you were just open from the get-go and say, hey, this is what it is. And you even talk about it on your podcast. So, and many agencies don't tell you that. They even tell you, hey, don't discuss the bill rate with like people on the floor, and if you do, we're going to blacklist you. But
there's
I
only
think
one reason for that. I mean, and again, this is what the industry has been since I've been involved in it. It's, we're gonna put smoke and mirrors and dress this whole thing up because we want these people to like us. And typically, I said is that you get a great recruiter who you really like, and that's what separates. And it really does. It was an important thing up until really about the time you guys came into traveling. That's what made companies money. And you hired great recruiters so they would stay with the recruiter and they wouldn't ask questions. They wouldn't compare paychecks, which I know you guys have actually physically done, which is awesome. But again, my philosophy, and I think this is where it's shifting to, is if you're taking a small amount and a reasonable amount for basically floating payroll, the more open there is, if there's nothing that, why should an agency be hiding anything? It's right there. Here it is. The only reason that you're hiding something is that you truly don't want your traveler to really understand it because they don't really want you to know how much money you're making. And I've told you how much money we're making. Some of those facilities, and the only reason, by the way, that we have to make what we make is for any operating expenses that we have, which of course they've got all that recruiting salary and all those, brick and mortar stuff. And that's basically to float that money, to hold on to that money for 6 to 8 weeks until we get paid for. Because you guys, you know now listening to me that we probably have been paid from that extension, but I guarantee there's a whole bunch of weeks that we still haven't been paid for, that we will be, but that we're out there. So we're floating payroll. That's really the best value that agencies bring, and hopefully an ease in credentialing is about it. And I think that, like I said, transparency. Why aren't we doing that? And there's only there's only one reason why. No one wants you to know. So it doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's what's great about Travel Evolved and NextGen MedStaff. They really do kind of go hand in hand. And there's no secret. I think the more educated a traveler is, the better fit they are for us, because we make more sense because it's right there. And I've always told you guys, if there's an assignment that I don't have somewhere in, let's just say, Texas, that you guys want, and it makes sense, you're going to jump on it because I don't have it. So why would you? and only you guys will know. However, if I have one, I think I've said we darn well better be the top paying because I know where we're at. So
And
I
I
feel
think
like you guys are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
sure.
So I feel like you guys are pretty well armed. I think that and there probably will be a time in the future where you find something that makes sense that we don't have, or for whatever reason, I feel very comfortable that you guys you guys know, I think, more than the average recruiter does about pay rates and how it works. And I think you're gonna upset some people because you're gonna be talking circles around them. They really won't understand.
Yeah.
But you're gonna advocate to be paid properly because you and I both know that you should be for, not only your hourly rate but everything else. So that's I think it's just good to hear, and I really appreciate that because it's fun because it's so unique. Like I said, I've always shied away from having you guys are the first people I've ever had on that are actually employees because I just didn't want to do it because it felt like a commercial. But I appreciate this, and I didn't ask you guys to do this. Am I paying you for this, by the way, when we're done? So let's talk. Can we talk? I guess while we're at it, I do want to take advantage of this, and I'll listen more listeners. I do want to talk a little about the app, and I want to kind of get your guys' experience on what that's like, because I think, in my opinion, I feel like we're still ahead of the curve on the readiness for the average travel health, whether it's nursing or allied, to understand that this is actually really simple. And if you know where you want to go and you've researched the cost of living there and you can figure out what number makes sense, then the two things, the pay and the ease of the app, and also the fact that it happens 24 hours a day and you're not waiting for your turn to be contacted when an agency opens, makes sense. What was it like? You never had talked to me. You were using the app. Tell me how that whole experience was and how it made sense.
Yeah, so I think the app makes it very easy because an app's just started coming into place maybe like a year ago. But it was
Exactly.
easy because other times you talk to the recruiter and you're like, hey, what do you have here? Or what are your top paying jobs? Or this, and then they sent you an email with everything. As opposed to with NextGen, you just hop on your app, filter it out with like new or highest paying or location, whatever you want. And then you just like click apply and then you're done. So it's very easy. There's no middleman, there's no loss of time because as we know, contracts can be here at 2 p.m. and be gone by 5. So it's as fast as that. And sometimes they're sitting there on the market, but it's a risk that we sometimes didn't want to take. And so NextGen made that very accessible and easy for us.
It's weird because we came out with our app. We started. So this all happened in my little pea brain in early 2020, right when before we really knew it was a pandemic, but it was basically December of 2019 and January of 20. And it just made sense to me. And we're actually going to dedicate a whole episode to NextGen so I can get out of the way and we can move on and we can talk more about, Travel Evolved. But what was crazy about it is that I will tell you guys, and I've said this before, that my initial thought was the most important feature is going to be the fact that we could pay people higher because we've eliminated that recruiting expense, which is expensive. I mean, it depends on, what salaries are in whatever town you're in, but commissions are huge. Travel nurses don't understand that pie is as big as it is by agencies that have recruiters to pay for that salesmanship. And that's just the way the industry has worked. What an app should do, and there are apps out there now, but they don't seem to do this, is that should be a reduction in an agency's, piece of the pie directly to the travel nurse, not anywhere else, because that's the whole idea. And I really thought that's going to be it. What's interesting is that as time has gone by, I feel that as important is the efficiency of the app, that it's literally, it could be a Saturday night at 10 o'clock. And if somebody, throws out a position in where you want to go, you get, if your notifications turn on, whether you're using an iPhone or Android, you get an instant notification and you can actually apply Saturday night. You're in front of that manager, and if they're working Sunday, they're looking at your profile, or if at least you're in front of them. Because I think the assumption from travel nurses especially seems to be that my recruiter calls me first when there's a Texas job comes up, and we don't know if that's true. They may have somebody that's open to everywhere in Texas, right? They're willing to go all the way south, all the way west, all the way east, and you guys may be more limited. So they're going to call those people first. They're not going to call you about a job, in the very far west side of Texas if that's too far away. So you get put down the thing, and I think, put down the pecking order, so to speak. And I've kind of grown to think that I think that's kind of more of it's as equal as benefit as being paid. I didn't really realize how important that was because of the way that a recruiter has to organize his or her day. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. And I think most people don't realize that they don't. If you understand the financials and you've been doing this long enough, then you know an assignment that makes sense and an assignment that doesn't. You don't have a recruiter trying to talk you into something that doesn't make sense, or skipping something that you may look at that does make sense to you, but not to them potentially.
Yeah. I think before we started using the app, it was something that we had to deal with. You have a recruiter send you maybe 3 jobs, and it's not something that you want. And when they are sending you those jobs, they are calling you every 5 minutes. But by the time you say no to those 3 jobs that you don't want, you stop getting those calls from them as much, because they probably push you down on the list. And sometimes you're with an agency, you're working with a recruiter, and then the next day they're like, oh yeah, there's a different person taking over your file. And
turnover.
Yeah. With NextGen, I think before we started, before we took the contract, we went on, applied to a bunch of contracts, and I think we had 2 lined up. It was I remember we were going to launch after the contract with the other agency fell through, and we just applied to a bunch of contracts that were out there. And by the time we got into the restaurant to eat, it said we already submitted to one of the contracts that we applied to. So it was that quick. It was very quick.
Fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, so here's the thing I want to kind of say, and I think you guys will understand this, is that what I think a lot of travelers don't think about is, what if out of the blue, and let's say after business hours, wherever your agency is, let's say you say, you know what, maybe we should consider Oklahoma. So instead of just clicking Oklahoma and seeing everything and getting notifications, you've got to wait until the next day for your recruiter. You got to hopefully leave him or her a message, maybe talk to him at Oklahoma. So the other thing I always think about is that you guys change your mind a lot, which is what you should do. All of a sudden, because it's based upon what you're seeing the results of. If you're not seeing results, or you look at rates currently and they don't make sense, you potentially, and we've talked about this, eventually you guys may open up going further and chasing some dollars. But you can make decisions like that and change your mind without having to, tell 3 or 4 or 5 recruiters and then hope they remember, and then, everything kind of mixes out. That's the thing I like. But the other thing I was going to say is that, remember on our app, and I think this is kind of great, is that we don't ask for any paperwork for you guys to see everything that you need to see on the pay rate before you apply. Because I always think, why make people jump through those hoops and then say, okay, now that we've got all this stuff, here's our really crappy, or here's our rates that we're going to present to you, which is what most companies seem to do, because I feel like they think you've spent all this time giving them the stuff, and so now you're almost kind of obligated, because you just don't want to do it all over again for their company to say, okay, tell us what you got. I think that's part of it, because we don't ask for anything until you actually hit the apply button. And then we look to see if we, the actually app looks to see what we have. And if we don't, it says, hey, thanks, we need, we may have your resume, but we need this skills checklist, or we need some of your certs if it's a different vendor, which I think is really also important for people to know, is that you just look. If it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, no problem. Just keep the app and, take whatever you need to. And then sometime a job will come in and make sense to you, hopefully. So.
Oh yeah. That's a good aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that part makes sense. And I think you guys did say at some point, I think, if I'm not, again, we've got over 200 people working, but what's weird is that everybody has my cell phone number, right? And texting is great because it does help. What's that?
I remember when I first started, you were like, I'm going to give the first 100 people my phone number. And now a year later, you're like, all of my travelers have my phone number. I can just imagine your phone.
No, because that's, first of all, I like it. You guys know I'm getting up there, but it keeps me on my toes. I don't know how to shut it down. I don't know how to turn it off. So what I found out with this company is that, just like I just said, when I would leave other companies and the day would be over, I'd take a little bit home with me, but the day was over. And I actually found that I thrive on the stimulation 24 hours a day, really. I mean, it's keeping me young, I'll put it that way. I don't know how I'm going to retire, because I don't think I ever want to. I think I'll literally drop dead 2 weeks after I retire, if I ever do. But so I think that's important. You said that you guys were, so that was that thing, is that it does move and switch like you want to, and it should be that way. So yeah, we text, but I mean, literally, I probably would hang up here and I'll have 4 or 5 texts, but it's usually just questions. I've got one gal in Hawaii right now that just got there and wants to extend, and I'm talking kind of the same honest conversation I had with you and saying, here's what I recommend, because she's worried about pushing too early, and I said, let's get some things going. But she did a lot of things to get there and had some expense. She even shipped her own car out there. She's on the Big Island. Now it's like I kind of want to justify and stay here longer because I want to enjoy it. So we're having, again, a candid conversation where I work for her, giving her the best advice and then listening to what she wants me to do so I can present it as she wants. So I mean, that's part of it. But obviously we've got a whole team. I think I've shared with you that, I am heading to California because I do believe now that the app is kind of moving along. We've got a whole bunch of new filters we're coming up with, whether it's rates, locations. We're going to be adding some things that may, you can potentially adjust your travel so that, you could get higher or lower. It does completely transparently affect your rate. So it'll show that, so you can kind of make decisions on what makes sense to you to get, travel and that sort of thing. So that's coming, but that's been, I think, a pretty good thing. But anyway, California, we're going to start working on, more. It's time for more credentialing people, because I think the way our company grows is credentialing and support, which is, I think, is that important. So when I said 100, I really thought that would be all I could handle. But the good thing is my phone doesn't really ring that often, and I think most people understand. And texting is so perfect. So if they have a question or need something, they text. And but of course they've got other people that they can text to and emails, which I know sometimes that's what we're going to work on, Maria, because we have to make sure that those emails they're so flying busy out there, and that's what we're going to go and work on. It's time to add. The nice part about our company is we're not adding, hoping that what we add will generate more revenue. The revenue's there, so now we can take profit, not nurses and allied people's salary, and we can take the profit and start to say it makes sense for us if we want to continue to go take some of that profit and expand it onto more personnel internally. So that's the model. So what's next for you guys? I mean, what's the horizon look like? Are you guys thinking about chasing dollars? Are you guys going to stick around down there? And I mean, what's the long-term agenda here?
I just started a new contract with you yesterday. So
I was going to check in with you and see how orientation was going, but I don't want to do it live. But I'll call you later just to see if everything's going okay. But I know that, you just joined Maria. You took a little break. You joined Maria on this one, so we'll check in and make sure we got Kronos or anything else going great. So, but is that, I think I don't think I'm confusing you. Is you did say at one point that you potentially might branch out and really go for some higher paying stuff and kind of treat your traveling as a annualized salary, and you may go for some high paying stuff and then maybe go someplace where it's closer to home or nicer and easier and lower paying. Is that still something you're thinking about?
yeah.
I put you guys on the spot.
I think we're such a different time in our lives right now, because of our professional desires and accomplishments, that right now we're literally taking it like a contract at a time. At least I am. Would I love to make more money? Yes, but I'm also in a phase of my life where now I'm in school, so my job is important, but now I have a different priority that takes precedence over that. So right now I feel like we're just taking it a contract at a time, and we'll see what happens.
Well, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the quintessential thing that I think is what I see the industry shifting toward. Very, traveler friendly, traveler centered customer service, because you're your own recruiter. You get to decide, and that's what I'm saying is that like I've said before, a lower paying assignment like what you were looking at originally that was close to home could make sense to you. And only you know that. And there's no way some person you barely know is going to be able to give you guys what you guys know. And it's so obvious to me that the industry is so behind in this. I mean, we're like the last industry that doesn't have technology doing this. I mean, we use these things for everything. I'm surprised it hasn't gone off while I've been on here. We use it for everything. And, that's why it doesn't make sense. But I'll tell you, I have nurses every day that say, I need a recruiter. And I want to say, do you? Are you sure? So guys, like I say, I'm excited for the first time. I think I said this originally on Travel Evolved. I said for the first time, I'm actually excited about what I do. This is not my chosen career. I kind of fell into this position and this career from an advertising background that I fell in love with. But there were times in previous, many years back, that I was very unsatisfied, very kind of, it just was a kind of a, there's days that didn't feel that good. And I don't have a lot of days like that because it's a totally different feeling. And I hope that it comes across to you guys with that. And so, we're going to keep, good. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate today, guys. And thanks for, wow, I can't even talk. Thanks for the very humble promotion. I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot. Like I said, I was hesitant to have actual NextGen MedStaff employees come on, but as we were talking, I think the topic made sense, and I really hope people listen to advocating for themselves and fighting for every dollar. It's too bad you have to, but I think if you find what works, you gotta understand the business side of travel nursing. I mean, I think if you don't take the time to learn that, you are absolutely setting yourself up for a lot of financial disappointment, because that's all it takes. I mean, if you're going to be a travel nurse in your case, or an allied professional, you have to understand how this industry works. And it's not complicated, is it? It's pretty simple stuff. We're not talking about really heady things here. It's just arithmetic. But if you don't take the time to learn that, you're gonna be walking away from money, whether it's, not even with us, but I'm saying with a company like ours, it's not even about that. But even with two, traditional companies, you're going to walk away from dollars if you don't take the time to understand what you're being presented.
And I've called you before, I've listened to an episode and I'm like, I still don't understand how this works. And you're like, okay, in 2 hours, I'll call you. And you'll take the time and you'll be like, this is why this is this. This is why this is this, So I'm really happy that we're making this episode on advocating for yourself, because I think as nurses, it's almost like a pool, and you either have a nurse that 100% advocates for themselves, and then there's ones that just get like rambled. There's really no like centerpiece, and I think it's very easy to advocate for yourself in this industry. It's just we're not trained maybe to. We don't have the education to, and so if you have people like you that are constantly educating travelers and giving them that information, then it's easy to advocate for yourself in every aspect of your life. You also have to be a self-starter. You have to want to learn. You have to want to see how your unit works, what you can do better, how to be a resource for them, how to be instead of being like, oh, you're just a traveler. No, you're a good traveler. I want to keep you. I don't just have you here. But your podcast really do, at least me, it definitely taught me a lot. And whether I have a girlfriend that comes in and I'm like, hey, I've sent you a couple people, I genuinely do like working for you, because first of all, it's easy. Every part of it is easy. There's hiccups every time, there's hiccups with things, but the app is easy. Communication with you is easy.
Thanks.
The system is made for us instead of to profit off of us. It's a great agency to work for.
Well, thank you very much. That's okay. We're going to cut. We're going to stop right there. That's going to be our next promo. No, I'm kidding. That's real odd. That's awesome. And again, I think two things you said, and one of them is, I think you guys would agree that I can't stress this enough with anybody out there. I don't care what agency you're working for. If you decide to do this, or you want to be successful, please, if you're not listening to us and me, talk to some travelers that know the numbers, because I agree with you. It's the reactions that some travelers have been traveling for a long time that finally get, for example, just how they should be paid for hours 36 to 40. Oftentimes that's anger, because they look back at how many assignments they've had and how much money they've walked away from. And I think the more that travelers demand that those hours be paid properly and higher, every agency is going to have to start doing it, because you're going to say, I'm not going to work for you because there's 20 other companies that have the exact same job at roughly the same thing, but that makes more sense because this manager talked about working 38, 39 hours. So that's a lot of money. They're going to start having to do that because they can change the industry. I think that's the first issue. And now I've already forgotten the second issue because I'm way older and I've already been there. But that's, again, I can't thank you guys enough. And I really do appreciate it. And I think you're right. I think what it was is that the communication aspect is really important. And I believe heavily, and that's what I think. I don't know if the episode's been released or not, but I just recorded one where I talked about, and I said, I think the next like 10 years is kind of going to be a very great period of time for travel nurses like it's never been. I can't predict bill rates and what the supply and demand is going to be, but I really do in my heart of hearts believe that you guys are going to force agencies to figure out how to not increase the bill rates from their vendors and their hospitals, but how to shrink their piece of the pie in order to stay competitive. And I think it's coming. And I think there's some people that are really worried about it. And I think all it's going to take is travel nurses and travel healthcare professionals and allied professionals to say, we got this. We got this. So,
yeah.
Well, guys, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much. It's been exciting. I'll be talking about orientation, and we'll make sure everything's okay. So I'll talk to you guys soon. But thank you guys so much for joining us again today. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay, so I think I failed miserably on the. We talked a lot about NextGen. First of all, let me just thank them both. I promise you guys, I did not ask them to talk about that. I mean, I'm not dumb. I knew that they were having good experiences, and I think most people do. I liked how Maria said, I think it was Maria that said it, that this industry has wrinkles. I mean, I've always been honest about that. A smooth assignment sometimes, in my opinion, doesn't let you know what you have with your agency because things just kind of go well. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. I wish all of them were smooth. It just isn't the world that we all live in because you've got you've got the hospital, you've got the agency. Sometimes you got a vendor in between. You've got Kronos reports that sometimes are or aren't, coming through properly or punch in, punch outs. You've got every hospital has its own thing. So we are forced into a world that goes wrong, and that's legitimate. But I do think that when things have glitches, as long as they're not major glitches, it kind of shows you what you have with your company. And, I know that kind of turned into a little bit of a, and I'm not joking, I'm like, maybe I should use that for some of the stuff. That was awesome. And I'm extremely grateful for what they both said. They're awesome. They're a terrific couple. I mean, like I say, I feel like that they've become friends of mine. I mean, I know more than we wanted to go on that with them. They're just a great couple. And I hope that I know them for a long time, and I'm looking forward to seeing them move through life. I mean, gosh, they're actually my kids are younger, but I'm definitely old enough to be their dad because I started late, and that's this thing. You marry younger women, that's what happens. So what are you going to do? But yeah, they're definitely, I ran into, never mind, I won't tell you a story, but I ran into a guy who was way older, and I'm like, wow, you actually could be my son. So I care a lot about them. I care a lot about everybody, and I hope that came through. The point of today kind of moved toward more of what I feel like the industry is moving to. But we've talked enough about that, and we're going to here in the rest of the episode. So I want to focus this post kind of wrap up on the things that I think that were really important on that conversation, and that is that you guys understand what is important to you, and you should have a good case and a good understanding of when to fight and when to not fight. And that's kind of what I told Maria. I think Nnamdi we were all three talking, I don't remember. But I said, let's have an honest conversation about what could happen. If in fact, and I'm talking about the example on the pay rate, and it actually did happen when they, on the time off thing. I said, this could end the assignment. They could say thanks, but no thanks. On the pay rate, I said, if we ask for this, they may feel like they were in a no-win situation, and you kind of had the high ground on them, and they may be upset about that, and they may say no, and then it might make for a tougher close to that first assignment. That's a real thing, but we talked about that, and again, Maria and Nnamdi were in charge of that. As long as all I wanted to do is make sure that they understood what could happen, and then an agency should be working for you. You should be in charge. We weren't worried about. In both cases, we weren't worried about them, being labeled as not able to return or DNU or that sort of thing, because one was a negotiation for a pay rate, a bill rate, really. I mean, Maria and I were talking about the bill rate, not the pay rate. She knew what that translated to because she's listened to us, and she and I have talked about it a lot. So she understood what that bill rate meant to her. Large percentage of that was coming from her. So she understood that. And obviously all of that was the taxable income, because it wasn't about per diems or meals and incidentals. So she was going to be losing that. So less taxable income, so slightly less taxes, but we kind of calculated what that would look like. And for her, it didn't make sense. again, it was more of a principle thing. But we talked about there could be that issue where they are going to be jaded and they're going to be upset and it might make it tough. And they may not say, if you decide at the 11th hour that, okay, we will take this lower rate, and we had this discussion, their attitude may be slightly different toward you and toward Nnamdi. And she said, I'm okay with that. And we had that discussion. And then we went to work for her. And it was me and the account manager, and we went to work and we got it done. We may not have gotten it done. And that's the whole point of what I'm saying, is that if we wouldn't have got it done, that was already out there and it was her decision. It wasn't about the company or about whatever. It's about what she wants to do, because listen, I know, like I said, there's going to be times when we're not going to be the perfect fit for them. But that's not what this is about. This is about you finding the perfect fit each time. And that's what I think this industry is moving toward. And the second situation was the same thing. I said, they may terminate. And sure enough, they actually did, which surprised me. I guessed that one wrong, because I looked at what Maria said, and so did she. And we both felt there's no way. But I think for principle for them, that particular manager was so upset that she said, well, I'm just not going to let them come back, because they did take the time off. They let them know. They weren't a no-call, no-show. They actually did tell them, we're not going to be here. And they ended the contract before they came back. And we kept saying, what's going on? What's going on? And when I say we, the two of them really were prepared for that to be the case. But if they were to say that there was going to be, that they were going to be not able to work with that facility anymore, which they never did, certainly they were allowed to work with us again, because I knew the circumstance, and I knew darn well that, and I know Maria, and that manager told her that, because this was told to me literally at the very beginning of that new assignment, which was like, it was months that they talked about it, but by the time the new assignment started, we still had 6 or 7 weeks until that weekend happened, and we talked about it every single time. And she was doing a lot of the communication, and she kept saying, we're doing this. Can you find someone to fill in? And the hospital was unable and kind of didn't really do very much to try to find someone to fill in. So they did what they had to do, and it was the right decision, because that's what I'm talking about when it comes to advocating for yourself. In their opinion, and I happen to agree with this one, sometimes I don't, this was the right thing to do. And sure enough, they knew that they have a very strong marketability. So if they hadn't had a good marketability, like they said, they get jobs quickly because they're really good nurses. And they've only been traveling for a little while, and they're not very old. They don't have 20-year careers yet, but they're solid. I know that's to be the case, because when we do put them in front of jobs, they literally do get them quickly, because they have some ability to float, so they're valuable. Knowing that decision to advocate for herself was good. What I'm saying is that if you don't have that marketability, my advice, or your advice to yourself, really should be maybe differently. And that's what that I believe traveling is going toward. You don't need to talk to somebody else to get their 6 months or 1 year of experience, with healthcare staffing, to tell you what you should do. You should be evaluating yourself and learning how to advocate for yourself, or to not advocate for yourself. That's just as important as advocating. There are times when you have to say to yourself, I'm okay with this. If the criteria that you're judging the event or the situation on is less than what the importance of the job is, if that all made sense. This is where I think it's all headed. I just believe that advocacy is part of, your own advocacy. I'm not talking about what a lot of, especially nurses talk about with nurse advocacy. This is kind of a subset of that, which is, I'm talking about travel. Your advocacy for what's right about an assignment. You guys do have options. I've always told you that. Us agencies are, beating the heck out of each other trying to earn your business. So you guys need to understand that you're a commodity, and you're a great commodity. And the more valuable you are, the more likely you are to get the things that you request. And that's how you change the industry. So, like I say, incredibly grateful for the kind words. I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed about it, because I hope you guys understand the fine line I'm trying to walk. I'm appreciative, and I think it's kind of good that we just finally got it out there, because I think sometimes, I always feel when I have these podcasts that sometimes I'm like, do people really think that I tell people the bill rate? Do they really think that we talk? And yeah, we do. This company is designed very differently, that I hope I can do this. At some point, if you ever need to talk to me, in 5 years from now, you should be able to talk to me. That's the way I want this thing to work. It's not, you don't have to talk to somebody that is a liaison between the issue. First you're going to talk to this or HR, but it's important. The design of this company is specifically different than anything else on purpose. This is what we thought about. And when I talk about NextGen MedStaff, I'm pretty sure I will give you guys kind of full concept of what we were trying to do. So that being said, the real thing I want you to take away from is that I still say the industry is changing. I think that there's a lot of travelers out there that don't truly think they have the knowledge to be their own recruiter, to actually apply to technical type agencies that you don't have to speak with somebody. But I think that if you try it, and it doesn't have to be ours, I'm telling you, try it with something that looks good to you, compare rates, do some research on your own, and trust yourself. And if you don't trust yourself yet, listen to everything we've done now, 95 episodes, and more importantly, talk to veteran travelers that can give you a lot more than I can here, a lot more than we can on this series, because this is supposed to be a fill-in, not the end-all be-all. Your traveler partners and coworkers are the source to help you understand, but talk to multiple ones and make sure you really get it. And once you do, like I've always said, you're going to be a force to be reckoned with. You just are, and that's where the industry is going. So very grateful. Thank you so much, Maria and Nnamdi. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed how the episode went. I hope you had a chance to see it. I loved it, and I'm feeling better now. So guys, as always, I will catch you next time on Travel Evolved.